investigated a very spectacular meteor, and Bigelow was unhappy with the investigation because he thought it was a UFO, and he wasn't going to be told it was a meteor. So,
was that the one in Russia that came down, or is this too late?
No, it was at the time. It was at the time of the coalition, so it was a spectacular meteor, but it wasn't that spectacular. And
I understand. So he already signed his lead investigator. Folks, usually there's one. The way the federal government has the way we do projects is we'll usually assign 1 to 5 investigators on a particular project, and then we'll assign a lead investigator. And on my projects, I'm usually lead, but I've also been on other projects, just a team player. And so this Mr. Webb, right? What was his first name? That was on the
Walter.
Bigelow. Walter Webb. So he was lead investigator. Now he was. How many was on your team as far as investigators?
No, there's no teams. There's no teams.
Oh, there was no teams in your group. Each person was assigned. Did you do it chronologically?
Walter Webb was his job. He was the lead investigator to investigate current UFO sightings. Now, Project 47. What I did is I went online and started an email list. So I got 300 people to volunteer to look at newspapers in their own area or to send me things that they had in their files. And 1947 was the primary thing I was doing, but the other secondary things I was doing from 1900 up till 1946, and then from 48 up to 65. We were looking at those items too. After I got through looking at, if I went somewhere, I looked first at for 47 incidents, and after that I tried to look at some of these others. And so I visited almost close to 100 archives.
Well, I think it's important that we get this. This is part of the disgruntled volunteers in social media and all the groups, because a lot of them we shut down. Like you said, some money's still in some of the coffers or banks or treasuries and our different groups. And then we're bringing them all together, and then Robert Bigelow comes in and starts our STAR team investigators.
That's later. That's later on. That's later on with MUFON, so...
All right, well, in the beginning, when Robert comes in, let's talk about right there with him and Mr. Webb and you. So, because this may all be new to Janet and Suzanne, because I don't think either one of them have been in on the inside like you and I have, or on teams or in investigations. But, Janet, you can correct me. You haven't done any in-house for any of these associations. I know Suzanne hasn't, because she told me she hasn't been into any ufology. But what about you, Janet? You haven't been in internal investigations, right? She may be stepped away right now. Okay. So, but Suzanne, you haven't, right?
No, I have. I'm sitting here and I'm listening, and I'm just holding the energy that there's an opportunity for me to learn, and I have a lot to learn, a lot.
Right.
So, what's interesting in listening to you talk, Dan, is that your mind is brilliant, it's focused, it's clear, it's articulate, and it's very exact. You have an extremely methodical thought process, exacting and scientific, and the details and the dates that you remember without stumbling is just inspiring.
Well, that's funny. Most of the time my memory is abducted.
Well, it sits you down and gets you on the right tangent, and your memory comes through in a way that's just absolutely flawless. It's really beautiful.
Right. So, yeah, like I say, if we're to replicate this project today, you could sit behind a computer in your home, and there are all kinds of newspapers online. You could do exactly what I did by visiting different libraries and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So this was, however, there are things that you can't, even today, you can't visit the National Archives online, even though back in the before 2000 they said, oh, everything will be online, don't worry, and the Library of Congress was saying, we'll be the only library in the country, everybody else will have every book there is online and everything. And I do want to go off on a tangent here. The fireflies are invading. The fireflies are invading.
Okay.
They're right here at the window looking in.
Oh my goodness! Is that time of year for you?
Yeah, I have an old farm up here, and of course we used to have lots of fireflies, and then they're in trouble as far as they're not. I don't think they're going to be extinct, but they're in a lot of trouble, and this year they really came back.
Well, tell people where you're calling from, and Janet may join us again. She's live. I mean, we're all live on the air, but we're all open mic. So she had explained to me she had workers in her house. That might have been the sound, so she muted. You remember when I asked her to come on a while ago?
Yeah.
So, but she's open. So when she comes back,
I'm on an old farm in Connecticut. It goes back.
Connecticut.
It goes back before the.
Civil War?
No, it goes back. It probably was here during the Revolution.
Wow.
Whoa. Well, there you go.
So I'm in the Northeast, which is not very heavily populated, and it's got like what we call it is the last green valley for Connecticut, and. This is mostly, it used to be farm, but it's all now gone back to forest.
Wow.
Yeah. My place looks like a jungle now. I mean, everything came up this year. Sometimes we have sparser years, but no, this is the green is just is fantastic. I don't want to get off.
I know people. Yeah, that's okay. I understand you. I really appreciate you being human and sharing, and I really appreciate Suzanne helping us. And she's new to you, and she likes the way you talk, so that's really good for our archivist and for our shows. Mm-hmm. I think it's wonderful, and Janet, I'm sure, will return with some questions here. But I know that what we need to do tonight is have people like somebody like Suzanne coming in is very important, folks, because there's various groups and associations in ufology, and I've noticed a lot of the young kids doing their own radio shows, and no disrespect, but a lot of on YouTube they just talk like they own ufology and know what they're talking about with the word and toss it around, and I've noticed a lot of people using alienology now. We help start all that. It's separate from ufology, and I'm really helping push that with phenomenology. And, of course, the government started, as your groups a long time ago started anomalous phenomena, so we have UAP and Associates now. But the point is, for me, is to say that old guys, like in the Men in Black shows, and TV, always reflects real life, but, we're moving our reality of ufology and our alienology and the study of phenomenology and unidentified flying objects, so to speak, but into our folk life groups, too, and having our own divisions, because it's so costly now. Yes, we can do a lot of things online, but we're doing our best. There's many flavors of ufology. And I wanted the Jan Aldrich flavor from back in the day, because I remember inside MUFON, and I couldn't be a member at that time, but I watched it all happen. But I remember in the old days when I was an investigator, and I couldn't be inside, but I did work for the government, but there was talk of the civilian and the government coming in and taking over, and then Robert Bigelow being a contractor for the government, controlling space, and you can say all that happened in the 80s forward or the 90s forward, but when do you recall? Because that's when I was asked to help, and some groups were quoting me at 2007 in UFO Digest, and I had a lot of groups ask him for help. I guess it was because of Facebook back then. But can you tell me, do you remember when you got involved with Robert Bigelow and Mr. Webb and all of that? Because it was confusing.
When Walter Webb, I've known him long before Bigelow. I knew him long before I went into the Army. And I was in the Army for 25 years. I knew Walter Webb back in the 60s when I was going to college in Boston. He was the chief astronomer at the planetarium up there. So I knew him way back before Bigelow. Bigelow was in 90. I'm not sure when the coalition was. I think it's.
Well, I know he went out with
92, 93,
Friedman.
But no, I don't think so.
Well, he was on. They took a plane out to him and Stan and McCarty. I think Tom McCarty.
Could be. I don't know.
Berliner. I believe Don Berliner was there. Yeah, there's a lot of history that we've got to pull back together. But that was in 92 to 94, I think. But so you're thinking he came in about that time? There's so many of us old guys got to pull the stories together.
Okay, so who are we talking about? Bigelow?
Well, I was talking about Bigelow and Berliner, Stanton Friedman, and one other guy. It was Tom McCarty, I believe. I forget now. They went and did the Anderson interview about 47 Roswell. When we had the Corona, when Stan was working on the crash at Corona, and I went out to visit Glenn Dennis in the 90s. So, and Roswell. You know who the Roswell story?
I can't see Walter Webb doing that.
Not Walter, Bigelow.
Oh, Bigelow may have done. Yeah.
So Walter's a lot older. Was he with NICAP? How did he get involved as an astronomer? Or did he join some of these flying saucers?
He was a friend of Dick Hall, so he was the astronomer advisor for NICAP. Astronomer
advisor for NICAP. Now, is that in one of the books you guys wrote long time ago?
Well, it does. You know, in most UFO investigators, they list the advisors. There's a list of advisors, and Walter Webb's in the advisor thing. So he investigated items around in Massachusetts and New Hampshire in the early 1960s till about 1964, and then Ray Fowler took over most of the investigations, and with the Massachusetts, he formed an investigative unit up in Massachusetts, so it was a Massachusetts subcommittee, and Walter was just more or less an advisor, but he was an investigator in New England there in the early 60s, and then I met him when I went to college.
Now, is he before Don Berliner? Because Berliner is the one I talked to on the phone when I was
working. Berliner was he got involved when he was younger. He got involved with the Ground Observer Corps, and somehow he whittled his way into being in the Ground Observer Corps. And so he whittled his way into the filter center. So he got to see the reports that came through the filter center. He wasn't really supposed to, but, you know, they had so much turnover in the filter center.